What's happening, people? Welcome to my F1 channel. Welcome to Peter on Pole. Season 2, Episode 3, Drive to Survive. What is happening? Let's talk about it. This right here is the clash between Daniel Ricciardo and Carlos Sainz. The title is called Dogfight. What did I expect when I saw that title? Well, I expected a bit of rivalry, of course. I expected some tension, some drama, some chaos. And in fairness, we didn't get a lot of that up until the end of the episode, which was quite strange. But, you know, it kept you guessing. So the main characters in this episode, you had Daniel Ricciardo and Carlos Sainz, obviously. You also had Cyril Abiteboul, Renault F1 team principal. You also had Zach Brown, CEO of McLaren. And then you also had Carlos Sainz's cousin as well. So yeah, it was a bit of a mixture. It was quite actually very well done by Netflix. I think they went with a completely different approach, which was great. So it was a different angle the way that they approached this episode. Dogfight, of course, had many meanings, and for each driver, wrestling with their own car was the first fight. You know, having to overcome that was really the first problem before we get into any rivalry between the two. Tough starts for both McLaren and Renault at the start of the 2019 season. And so the first half of the first maybe, say 70% of the episode, it was all separate, if that makes sense. So it was about Daniel Ricciardo's story and it was about Carlos Sainz's story. You never really got the two head butts? What am I talking about? Anyway, you don't get those two clashing each other up until the end of the episode. What was interesting to see was whether the kind of picture that they were talking about, because Daniel Ricciardo makes the point that McLaren had offered him a seat last year, but he turned it down because he wasn't really convinced at the car, because it was a terrible car last year, finishing at the back of the grid. Not the very back, but the back nonetheless. But however, this year it was a case of, they were almost painting this narrative of, did Daniel Ricciardo make the right decision to go to Renault? Because he was always talking about that at the beginning of the episode. He was saying, you know, people are asking me and still don't understand why I went to Renault in the first place. And then you have, towards the end of the episode and throughout the episode, because it's up against McLaren, it's almost like, should I have gone there instead? And so like the two options were Renault and McLaren, really. That were the realistic ones. So it's interesting that they've used these two to be the rivalry. They've used the two drivers to be the rivalry as well. Carlos Sainz, formerly of Renault. So there's a few connection and a few dots there, which Netflix have done very, very well. But yeah, it kind of keeps it in the back of your mind. Which was the right decision to make? Was it to go to Renault? Would it have been to stay at Red Bull? Would it be to join McLaren? So I loved the way that they kind of set that up, because it got me in there again and made me think about the whole entire season. But yeah, it looked really, really good. Great stuff from Netflix. Great position to set this episode in. Very, very unique in that way, which I really, really liked. Carlos Sainz going through the factory in McLaren, wondering how on earth this team isn't winning more often than not, which, you know, so it's a big team, of course, McLaren in Formula One. However, the risk at the same time is he's got, you know, last season, Carlos Sainz lost his seat to the fact that Daniel Ricciardo was going to Renault, right? But Carlos Sainz obviously needed to get a seat for next year, for this season. And you know what? I'd say he's lucky to get McLaren. I know McLaren ain't performing too well, but I think he was lucky to still get that seat, because he could have really vanished and that would have been the end of him. And he has to nail this season with McLaren, because it's a risk in the sense that, look, this car could be terrible again, and who knows what we're going to get from Sainz in terms of performance-wise, whether people will believe in him anymore, whether they'll think, you know what, he actually isn't all that good, and then he could just fade away into the distance, as many drivers do. People who have potential, all of a sudden you don't hear anything from them, they just vanish, and you know, that's just down to the performance of the car sometimes, and unfortunately that's the cruel part about F1, is that you can get sort of, you know, bombarded out. We're heading to Baku, and for Daniel Ricciardo so far, every single race has been a problem. There's been one issue after another in every single race. This is according to Cyril. But we get to Baku, and Baku's been like it's been a high and lows thing for Daniel Ricciardo. 2017, he won the race with Red Bull. 2018, he got into that accident. Do you remember that accident with Max Verstappen? So 2019, who knows what's up for grabs? Hopefully Danny's hoping that he can get a better response this year. 2019, he overdoes it with the car. He was overtaking Daniel Kvyat, and he broke so late he had to take the car out wide, but it was into a dead end area, so he had to reverse to come out. He's reversed to come out of that area, but he's hit into the back of Kvyat because Kvyat also stopped and was braking late. And Daniel Ricciardo just didn't see him, and it was just obviously a loss of concentration there. And it was a terrible, terrible day. He had to retire the car, so another bad day for Ricciardo at Renault, which then paints this picture, of course, that this is the wrong decision, Danny. It's facing that way. That's the way it's looking. Again, some of the things I like when they go away from the track and they go to either their homeland or wherever it may be. This time we're in LA, where Danny Ricciardo likes to go away for a little while. He's there with his personal trainer Michael, who he's known since he's 11 years old, so they've got a great relationship between the two. He's very open and honest. He talks about, trying to refocus, recharge, because when you have those mistakes, as a driver, you live with them. So you sort of get into the mindset a little bit of what a Formula One driver actually goes through when it comes to, because they're humans at the end of the day, so they do make mistakes. And then him and Michael are talking about, man, that McLaren is fast this year, isn't it? And all of a sudden, it keeps bringing up, like you keep hearing about McLaren in this episode when it's the Ricciardo Renault piece, which is very, very interesting. On the other hand, McLaren's pieces, you don't get any Renault talk at all. So other than the fact that, Sainz, I used to be there, but now they're a competitor. After the LA spell with Daniel Ricciardo, we got to Surrey, where Carlos Sainz has moved to, because closer to the McLaren works team. And it talks about, him leaving his family. He's left everybody behind, mum, dad, the lot, girlfriend as well. He's left everyone back in Spain. And it kind of adds to the pressure, because it adds more to the risk, because he is fully trying to invest himself in doing this, and to the point where it seems unusual, to his friends and family, when they're asking how come you're there all the time, and for him, obviously those from the outside looking at it what are McLaren are they forcing you to be there? Are they are they bossing you around a little bit? And it's probably none of the like. What I love, if anything, is Carlos is trying to make the best out of the situation, trying to see what he can do in order to improve the car. Because it's more than just the fact that McLaren need to do well, Sainz needs to do well as well. So they both got the same goal, and I think Sainz is trying to work together with the team, which is great, to improve that car. Some of the things that surprised me actually was how good the McLaren car was the second phase of the race. They had the race in Spain, and this is when it actually became the two battle now, head to head. It was Daniel Ricciardo versus Carlos Sainz. It was clear as day. And, both of the cars were interchanging. So McLaren start off ahead, but Daniel Ricciardo, he's flying, he passes the McLaren. Once they go into the pits and they change the tyres, they did it at the same time, so there was a bit of tension and suspense there. Once they've come back out, Carlos Sainz all of a sudden grabs this pace from nowhere, and the McLaren car just seemed to get better and better on the newer tyre that they had. I think they went onto the medium tyre, and it just seemed to do a lot better than what was going on with Renault. In the end, McLaren finishing the points, Carlos Sainz in P8, Daniel Ricciardo finishing in 12th outside of the points. I mean, it's a really, really shocking chain of events at the moment. Remember, Renault finished in 4th in the previous season, but they were looking nowhere near it this season. They looked near the back of the midfield for sure. The things I didn't like, obviously, because this is a bit of a sadder story at the beginning, because both teams were just awful at the start. McLaren pick up the pace as time goes on. Renault's going nowhere. And so you sort of feel man, it's not another sad one, in my mind, I was just what, let's just freshen it up, I was feeling let's just get Ferrari and Mercedes in a conversation, because I'm actually done with talking about these midfield teams and the struggles they're going through, because it just seems nothing but pain and strife. And I just needed something more uplifting. Give me something near the front of the grid where it's two teams competing for number one. That's a more happier story, if you will. But this was just a bit of in the middle of the episode, I was just a bit man, this is a lot, man. It can be mentally draining. And you got to be careful how often you watch the episodes. I know with Netflix, obviously, it's easy to binge episodes. But with this one, I feel you got to be careful with the binge, because you get actually exhausted. I get tired by the end of the episodes, and if you're doing 2-3 episodes in one go, mate, it is challenging. How do I rate the episode? Well, I think I'm going to give it a good 9 out of 10, because and this might sound biased, I'm giving good ratings, but the thing is, Netflix went with a different direction in terms of rivalries. If you look back in the first season, you had the rivalries of Alonso and Sainz, you had the rivalries of Verstappen and Daniel Ricciardo, whether it was Red Bull and Renault. There were different types of rivalries, which was good. In this one, however, they kind of set like two different stories apart, and then they brought it together right at the end. And I just saw, I like the way that they kind of thought of a new direction. They thought of something fresh, something new. They mixed it up a bit, and I fully appreciate that. The episode, of course, was like I said, it wasn't the most pleasing one in terms of like emotions. But it was a case of, you know what, they still made a great story in this episode. They actually created a very, very good story. And this piece alone actually kind of stands out in terms of all the other episodes that I like to do with rivalries. This one really did stand out for me. So I think it's one of the best episodes in terms of rivalry. And I just like the change, I like the difference of it. I don't know how I feel if I go back to it again, but watching everything in sync and then seeing this, I'm thinking, okay, I like the direction they went in. They because it's easy to just fall back to type. You know, season 1 was great. Oh, let's just do it again. And then you would have been a bit like, it was a bit boring. I guess that we wanted something new, mix it up a little bit. And they have, so full credit to them on that. Two things I noticed in this episode. Carlos Sainz, in the 2 battles he's been in with Alonso and Ricciardo, he's finished out on top both times. And it got me thinking, wow, actually, this driver's, I think, is quite underrated in the Formula 1 paddock. I don't think anybody really talks about Sainz. He's not the most popular, and not because he's not liked, but just because there are, you know, there's so many other characters in the Formula 1 garage. But that guy is actually very, very quick. He's very, very good. And he, you know, takes after his dad, who was a phenomenal rally driver, 2-time world champion. The other thing I noticed as well is that when it came to the McLaren team, the man was invested. Carlos Sainz was drunk on McLaren. He was drunk on the team. He did everything he could to get the best out of the performance. He wanted to be the best. And there's something in me that just feels like he's got the streak in him of being a world champion. He's got the determination. He was, you know, in the McLaren offices from Monday to Friday. He was in the gym all the time, his personal trainer, every single day. His nutrition changed. He was on a different diet. He was working out ridiculously, and he was always in meetings and conversations with the McLaren team. Now, maybe other drivers do that, other teams do that, but the fact that I got to see this, I can speak on what I saw. He seemed so heavily invested, to the extent, like I said earlier, his family asking him, how come you're there all the time? This man cared about winning. For him, it was a case of, no, there's a lot at stake here, and I'm going to do everything I can to get the best out of the car. And I think it was one of those, they needed that kind of partnership. They needed that commitment from somebody, McLaren. They need that commitment, and I feel like they got that with Carlos Sainz. And Zach Brown was saying, you know, this is a man who I feel like will be here for many years to come. I absolutely love his obsession with it. If I was a Formula 1 driver, I'd love to think I'd be like him, where I'd want to take in all the information and absolutely get completely obsessed and saturated in it. And that was just a brilliant side of Carlos that I got to see, which I did like. That was episode 3, Dogfight, Danny Ricciardo versus Carlos Sainz. It was brilliant. A great episode to watch. Let me know in the comments below, what did you think about this episode? Let me know what your likes and dislikes were. Like the video if you like the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Peter on pole. With that said, lights out.